Hey cats, it's your midsole man, Eddbud here. Today I've got an initial review on a shoe which I feel is one of the best value options released in 2024. We got the Kd900.2 from Kiprun, a non-plated low weight trainer from the brand with a 120 quid price tag. Its max stack is a banger. Let's get to the review. Thanks for joining me on the channel. Do hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like too. Help us out with a comment as well down below to fight the algorithm. Dankeschön. This one's been sent over to me by Kiprun for review, but they're not paying me to make this video. In a UK 11 or US 12, this one is 264 grams or 9.3 ounces. Just want to clarify some stuff on my measurements. There was a comment placed on one of the videos recently that suggested that they were wrong. I've tested a lot of shoes and I'm very confident in my measurement methods. Decathlon actually sent out the wrong size in these shoes. They sent me the sample size originally, so I got to measure those and see what they came in at, and surprise surprise, when I did that I had exactly the same measurements as per the Kiprun website. So that sample size was around about 243 grams, that's about 8.6 ounces. And when I measured the stack height, I had 38 or 39 millimeters, which is exactly what they state. So clearly the way I'm measuring the heel stack here is spot on. I do like to give you the measurements in my size, that's what I'm running in. Thus you can relate my experiences to the shoe that I'm actually running in rather than the sample size. So I hope that gives a bit of clarity in terms of, you know,
the measurements are wrong, bro, you're inaccurate.
I've got 42 millimeters of stack height here in my pair, 34 millimeters up front, making for an 8mm drop. About 11.9 centimeters up front, so it's a little bit more on the narrow side, I suppose, and about 8.5 centimeters in the heel, so it closely resembles something you might get from Adidas, maybe one of the Adi Zero series. A more nimble sort of narrower profile blaster. It's certainly in the mold of that SL2 from Adidas. Rubber wise, we do seem to have two different formulas here. One in the sort of midfoot and forefoot, which is coming in at about 60 Sure A, and then in the heel it seems a little bit tougher, maybe around about 70 Sure A. Very hard to measure the actual midsole softness here. It is certainly more on the responsive or firmer side. It's coming in at around about 30 Sure A, but I think it could be a bit softer than that due to a quite thick outer layer to the foam. Right, that's the stats. Let's get into it with the upper first. Upper wise, an interesting model. There's some strange things, but also some very good things about the shoe. It's this weird extra bit of material here down near the front of the toe box. Could have removed that. Doesn't need to be there. Oddly, the shoe came laced in a really strange way. The laces sometimes were over the top of the eyelet, sometimes underneath. I redid it and got a much better lockdown. So you might want to do that, relace the shoe when you first get it. I seem to get a better lock around the initial eyelets actually when I relace the shoe. So it really did make quite a difference. One slight down point for me on the shoe on my initial runs is the tongue. It just feels a little bit long. It was kind of digging into the sort of top of my foot here. If you got rid of a centimetre or so, it'd probably be absolutely spot on. I got around it by actually moving the tongue round, sort of sliding it round to the lateral side, and that seemed to eliminate the issue. There's a very flexible mesh to the entire upper. It's quite breathable actually, and reasonably minimal as well. You haven't got any overlays here all over the shoe adding weight. The only real reinforcements here are this heel clip. It's kind of like a plastic frame around the back of the foot. I didn't really notice it at all, to be honest with you. It does feel like there's some type of internal heel counter as well, but it's quite low profile. A much better fit in the heel than the last Kiprun shoe that I tried out a few months back. Didn't get any discomfort here and no heel slip whatsoever. I think that was the more expensive Kd900.2. I think the upper here is actually a big improvement on that. Even though it's a little bit more trainer-like, it still doesn't feel plush, that's for sure. So I like the laces. There's enough flex to them to get a good sort of grip over the top of the foot, and the length isn't too bad. You haven't got loads of excess material flapping around. I would suggest that the shoe is true to size. In my UK 11, I wouldn't want to go like up or down half a size. It's certainly a more sort of racy, up-tempo fit, but I think that's the intention of the shoe, so that's what you want. So very conforming material around the foot, and aside from the tongue length, I think the upper's performed very, very well so far in my initial runs. I'm going to give this a 2.7 out of 3 for the upper after my initial efforts. So midsole wise, the actual formula here is a bit more compressive underfoot than the stats would suggest. It's an EVA and PIBA based blend by all accounts. They're calling it V foam. It's certainly more of a rebound like material, along the lines I guess of Puma's Nitro stuff. It's quite an aggressive and engaging ride. It's kind of why I've left the tempo next percents up here, because kind of reminded me of that a little bit. I wouldn't suggest it's like a replacement for that shoe by any stretch, but there were certainly feelings there that were similar. Certainly felt good at around 10k to a half marathon pace for me. Perhaps even get away with doing like a 5k in it. I think the shoe's light enough for that and responsive too, though perhaps it felt more at home around sort of like 1k reps to that half to 10k effort. I think you do start to feel the lack of a plate here when you're going at a much higher speed in the Kd900.2, but when you consider the price that this one's positioned at, and there's lots of other models out there, they're almost double the price that don't feel like this. I think if you consider picking this up as like a daily use shoe, as a training option, it's got super low weight, an engaging ride, it's 120 quid. It's just hard not to like it. So hints of the tempo next percent there, but nowhere near as loud. This was actually a very quiet shoe in operation. I had to yell at a few people in front of me because they just didn't hear me coming. The shoe did feel fine at a lower clip, around about 8:30 per mile, in between some of my sort of faster intervals, but I found it went quickly up through the gears. You didn't really feel as if you were running in a sort of slightly different way or anything. Shoe's quite natural in use. Sometimes you get these shoes with a big max stack and this squashy foam without a plate and they feel really unstable, but that isn't really the case here. As you're going around a bend, you feel that sort of sinking feeling in your stomach and underfoot, but I wouldn't be too worried about the stability on offer here, despite the fact you've got a big stack in the heel. I think I'll do another video down the line with some SL2 comparisons, because I feel that this shoe and that one are very, very similar in operation, but I think for an extra tenner, the upgrade to the midsole alone really is worth it here for the Kiprun. So a good showing in my testing so far. I'm going to give this one a 2.6 out of 3, only reduced for the lack of significant pop due to the shoe not having any sort of stabilizing element. Maybe like a midfoot sort of shank could have just given it a little bit more propulsion perhaps. Grip wise, the outsole traction is similar to the Nike Zoom Fly models of the past. You've got three main sections to the rubber. You've got this kind of crash pad on the lateral side. There's a section that stretches from the midfoot up into the forefoot here, and then a piece in the rear, in the heel of the shoe, that stretches right back to the curve of the midsole. It does feel a little bit tougher back here in the heel. It feels like they've got a slightly thicker rubber. It's a slightly tougher formula. I think that will grant the shoe a little bit more durability and longevity. The smaller ridges up here in the forefoot do take on quite a lot of grit and grime, seem to get filled up quite quickly, and are really hard to clean actually. You're going to need to get your sort of finer bristle brush to get some of that stuff out there over time. I think if you're running on road and you're running on pavements, you're probably going to be okay. I wouldn't take this on like some light trails or anything. There's too much exposed midsole here. It's just going to chew it up very quickly. In fact, the rubber up here in the forefoot reminds me of the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent version 1 and 2. Those stretched squares here are very, very reminiscent of that shoe in terms of their look, but I think you've got a little bit more depth to the rubber here. Kind of odd, there's a section here around the sort of midfoot, I suppose, that almost doesn't touch the ground when you look at the shoe if it's on a flat surface. It does compress somewhat, and I think it must do at some point, but it's certainly an area that isn't sort of filled up with grit and stuff, so I don't think it's making all that much contact. Perhaps the strange design is supposed to promote some sort of trampoline-like effect, but it isn't all that apparent if that is the case. No idea on durability on this one. It's sort of unknown rubber. It's certainly on par though with some of the other stuff I've tested out, so I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. Certainly did the job on cornering though. It felt really good going around bends, felt quite assured. I'm going to give this one a 2.7 out of 3 for the outsole so far. We got to talk value now. I think it's a bit easier to talk value when you've got a shoe that's like closer to 100 quid than like 200 or 300. I think Kiprun have got a great value shoe here. It's light and bouncy when you consider there's some heavier, denser models out there that are far less exciting to run in than this one that cost like 3 times as much. It's certainly more fun to run in than something like the Pegasus 41. If you want like a nice speedy daily shoe. I think this could do the job. There's certainly less heft as well. There's far less weight in this one. Perhaps more on par with something like the Pegasus Plus, though I feel that this one's far more engaging. I think that might be down to the weight difference once again. There's a good like 40 grams difference between this and that Pegasus Plus. And you've got some extra stack height here, and most of the foam's actually concentrated under the foot rather than it sort of splaying out to the sides. Nike seem hell-bent on that sort of surface area business. It can just make the shoes feel a bit overblown in all fairness. Probably closer to the Adidas Adizero SL2, though we're a slightly long tongue away from beating that shoe. It almost feels like race-like in comparison to the SL2. Certainly in terms of the upper, this feels a little bit more like a shoe you can use for a sort of variety of runs. It wouldn't be out of place if you raced in it, though the Adidas shoe's got a far more traditional feel to it and more padding, certainly around that heel counter area. So I think there's a ton of value for what you get here in terms of the price. It's fun to run in, most importantly, and it's well put together as well. There's no dodgy glue seepage or sort of misaligned parts here. There's clearly some care been taken in the manufacture of this one, and I think it's putting some shoes that are like £200 plus to absolute shame. So if you want a nice up-tempo, non-plated training and race option that's closer to £100 than anything on the market, I think the Kiprun Kd900.2 is where it's at. I'll give this one a 2.8 out of 3 for value so far. So only real negative points here are the tongue length. It's just a bit too long. If I've totaled the scores up correctly, that gives us 10.8 out of 12 after my initial runs for the Kiprun Kd900.2. Have you been running in any Kiprun models so far? This one's certainly the best one I've tried out at this point. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one down in the comments. Very quick musical interlude for you. Managed to pick up an absolutely fantastic bargain the other day in HMV for a tenner. A live album from the group Eddbud called Dreamcatcher. If you don't know, Eddbud are a sort of super group really in terms of rock and roll. Lemmy's vocals on this one are absolutely brilliant. Just gravelly, raw, in your face, you know, sort of warts and all, no pun intended. Rest in peace, Lemmy. My favourite here is Rock and Roll Will Save You. There's something about Lemmy's voice that there's some sincerity there. You can tell that the guy really means it. Absolutely fantastic drums, brilliant rockabilly guitar playing all over the whole album. The first few bars alone of their version of Route 66 is phenomenal. This has got all the best bits of, you know, Run Rudolph Run, that sort of metal version that Lemmy did a while back, but loads of rockabilly tracks. It's all stuff from the 50s and 60s here. You got practically everything covered from Chuck Berry through to Johnny Cash. Go and check this one out, Eddbud with their album Dreamcatcher. Thanks for tuning in, people. Hope you enjoyed today's review. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. Drop us a comment too to help with the algorithm. My name's Eddbud and I'll be seeing you.